Senate scramble. Republicans focus on a skinny repeal to fix the health care bill. We're on Capitol Hill with today's Vote-A-Rama. Our first liberty. The president picks Kansas Governor Sam Brownback as ambassador for international religious freedom, a prominent honor for Senator Tim Scott.
And frankly, it just underscores the power of Matthew 5:44.
The South Carolina Republican is singled out for his conscience, courage, and compassion. And honoring wounded servicemen and women. Our Catholic First Lady is heading to Canada. We'll tell you how it relates to Prince Harry on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, July 27, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Senate Republicans unable to pass an Obamacare repeal only or a repeal and replacement bill set their sights on a third option. It's a bare-bones bill that cuts some of Obamacare's most controversial parts. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi is covering the second full day of debate. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Senators are wrapping up 20 hours of debate, and then the real fun begins, a Vote-A-Rama, where every single senator can introduce changes to the health care plan in rapid-fire succession.
Remember the days of Schoolhouse Rock? I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill. It can be a messy process.
Republican Steve Daines of Montana warns health care won't pass the Senate unless it defunds Planned Parenthood.
We got to continue the fight. When we take a look at the battle for the unborn, the battle for the most vulnerable in our society, that is a fight we must continue.
But Democrats are fighting back to kill the bill and its pro-life protections.
We will make clear to the public what they're doing in the middle of the night, behind closed doors, offering an amendment that puts millions of people off of health care, raises insurance costs, and defunds Planned Parenthood. And we are not going to sit here and take it quietly.
The amendment is not agreed to.
Republicans fell short on two earlier versions of health care reform this week. A possible last chance, they're now putting together what's called a skinny bill, a stripped-down version. It would likely cut the requirement that forces people to have insurance.
You're supporting the skinny bill, but people are going to say this is doing all the work behind closed doors. What do you say to that?
Well, that wouldn't be right, because tonight, anybody who wants to stay up all night and watch will see senators offering virtually unlimited number of amendments.
We don't even know what is in the legislation that the Republicans will bring forward. How do you amend something when we don't even have a base bill to amend?
And tonight's voting marathon could stretch into the early hours of Friday, but I am told that this skinny bill will likely wipe out any of the amendments that pass tonight. But Republican senators tell me they are confident that defunding of Planned Parenthood will stay in the bill.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi at the Capitol. Thank you, Jason. The debate over health care in the Senate highlights deep divisions in the Republican Party, especially as it relates to health care. Senator Mike Lee, a Republican from Utah, joins us now. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Lauren.
The GOP plan, the skinny bill that's rolling back the individual and employer mandates, seems to be the way that you're going. Have you read it? Do you expect to get to 51 votes?
I think there's a decent chance of that. It's impossible to say until we actually see bill text. I haven't seen bill text yet, and so hopefully that's something we'll be seeing soon.
There were a lot of comments about how there aren't public hearings on the health care bill. Senators, the GOP senators had criticized Democrats about this. Why is that?
I think it's an unfortunate part of the process that it has been so closed. I don't know of any good reason why it needed to be. I don't understand why we wouldn't want it to be. The fact is that Obamacare was passed into law 7.5 years ago after a closed-door process produced a 2,700-page bill that no one had read. We do need to repeal it, and I think it's a little unfortunate that we haven't had a more open process.
You and Senator Ted Cruz of Texas introduced the consumer freedom option for insurers really to sell these bare bones, low-cost policies. don't you think that by not agreeing with the rest of your colleagues that you are part of the reason why this can't get passed?
No, not at all. In fact, we had a real problem manifest itself yesterday when we got down to the very same repeal bill that we passed as a Republican Congress in December of 2015. We voted on that same provision yesterday. And 7 of my Republican colleagues, most of whom had been here in 2015 when we voted on and for that bill, voted against it. That is the problem. That is why we are where we are, where we're now having to consider a much skinnier option, when the plan all along had been to start with the 2015 bill and build it out, make it even more aggressive in repealing Obamacare.
If I'm somebody outside the Beltway and I'm watching all of this and I hear repeal and skinny and replace and not replace, and I think I'm going to be dizzy and not really care so much about the process, but about what's being done for the American people. What do you say to those folks?
They're absolutely right to feel that way. Look, every single Republican who has campaigned for any federal office, whether for U.S. House of Representatives, U.S. Senate, or for the presidency, over the last 7 years has done so on a platform that included repealing Obamacare. For us to be not doing that, for us to not move forward with a one-sentence repeal, or something at least as aggressive as what we did back in December of 2015 when President Obama was still in office, is inexcusable.
Thank you so much, Senator Mike Lee of Utah. The President's new communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, is doubling down on leaks coming from the White House, and he's publicly sparring with White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. Correspondent Mark Irons reports from the White House. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Scaramucci went after the chiefs of staff. He did not directly accuse Reince Priebus of being a leaker, but he is comparing their relationship to that of the biblical brothers Cain and Abel. And as you remember, Cain killed Abel. But Scaramucci did extensively talk about the White House leaks today, calling them nefarious and backstabbing. Scaramucci claims his own federal financial disclosure form was illegally leaked. However, the form was actually released to a reporter after public records request. In a tweet that has been deleted, Scaramucci says, "In light of the leak of my financial disclosure info, which is a felony, I will be contacting the FBI and the Justice Department, #swamp." And then adds Chief of Staff Reince Priebus' Twitter handle at the end of that tweet, implying Priebus is the leaker. But Scaramucci denies that interpretation. He is also saying President Trump has a good idea of who's responsible for the White House leaks.
What the president and I would like to tell everybody, we have a very, very good idea of who the leakers are, who the senior leakers are in the White House.
In today's White House press briefing, Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders avoided commenting directly on Scaramucci's comments.
This is a White House that has a lot of different perspectives because the president hires the very best people. They're not always going to agree. There are going to be a lot of different ideas. Unlike previous administrations, this isn't groupthink.
After the briefing, I ran into former Press Secretary Sean Spicer outside the White House and asked him if there is any evidence that suggests Reince Priebus, the Chief of Staff, is a leaker. He did not answer my question. Lauren.
Correspondent Mark Irons at the White House. And also at the White House today, the President and Vice President honor the first responders of last month's shooting at a Republican baseball practice that injured House Majority Whip Steve Scalise.
These officers saved the lives of every innocent person on the field that day.
Today's honors are part of the administration's American Heroes Week. Congressman Scalise was released from the hospital on Tuesday. He's now in an inpatient rehabilitation center. President Trump announces Kansas Governor Sam Brownback as his pick to be the next ambassador at large for religious freedom. If he's confirmed by the Senate, Brownback's job will be to promote religious freedom around the world through U.S. foreign policy. National security correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Religious freedom advocates are welcoming Governor Brownback's nomination. It's a position here at the State Department that has been vacant since President Trump took office. For his part, Governor Brownback thanked President Trump for the appointment via Twitter today, saying religious freedom is the first freedom, the choice of what you do with your own soul. I'm honored to serve such an important cause. Conservatives are praising the president's decision, noting that as a member of the Senate, Brownback worked actively on promoting religious freedom in the U.S. and around the world. In February, he talked to EWTN News Nightly about his conversion to Catholicism, partially inspired by his meeting Mother Teresa.
When I met her, this was her last foreign trip. She was really frail. She was kind of sliding. And I go to put her in her car, and I thought, you know, I just caught a great person a little late in life there on the downhill side. Then she grabs my hand and she stares me in the eye and she says 3 words 4 times. She just goes, "It's all for Jesus. It's all for Jesus, all for Jesus, all for Jesus." And the car door is shut, and I just sat there and going, I just got the wisdom of the universe in 3 words. You know, I mean, it still stirs me.
Brownback says he had prayed about converting to Catholicism over the course of 4 years before joining the church. He's also a longtime advocate for pro-life legislation at the state and federal level. Also today, the State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert says that officials here at the State Department look forward to working with Sam Brownback. Traditionally, the ambassador for religious freedom reports directly to the Secretary of State, but if he's confirmed, Brownback and his staff here would also submit reports directly to President Trump about religious freedom violations as they investigate it around the world. Lauren?
Shows how important that is to the administration. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby at the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. A British judge has ordered critically ill infant Charlie Gard be moved from a hospital to hospice. The judge made the order after a noon deadline today for Charlie's parents and a hospital to agree to an end-of-life care plan. Charlie's parents wanted to take him home to die, but the hospital treated the 11-month-old with a rare genetic disease said it was not practical. U.S.-backed Kurdish forces continue their advance on Raqqa, Syria, the self-named capital of ISIS. The U.S. has about 1,000 troops in Syria, mostly involved in training and advising the local forces fighting against the terror group. The campaign started in the beginning of June. Syrian Democratic forces control almost 50% of the city. Clashes erupt between Israeli police and Palestinian stone throwers at a contested Jerusalem shrine. It reopened on Thursday. Thousands of Muslim worshippers had flocked to the Temple Mount for the first organized prayers at the site in nearly 2 weeks. This was following Israel's removal of security devices installed after a deadly July 14th attack. Religious freedom advocates hope the Catholic Church in China will one day have a normalized relationship with the Holy See. There are approximately 12 million Catholics in the communist nation. Half belong to the state-controlled Patriotic Church, which rejects the Holy See's authority and appoints its own bishops. The other half belong to the underground church, which is faithful to Rome. Edward Penton is Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register. Welcome to the program. Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin has given a new interview in an Italian newspaper. He talks about Vatican relations with China. What did he reveal?
Well, nothing concrete as such, Lauren, but he did talk about and stressed again the importance of long-term dialogue, which he says can build trust and encounter with the other party. He also spoke about the right of the Church to demand religious freedom, and also spoke of a healthy realism, and realism really relying on God for the future, and the future rests in the hands of God.
Donald Trump has nominated someone to be an international religious freedom ambassador. Tell us about China and the situation facing Catholics in China.
Well, ever since relations broke off in 1951, there have been sort of on and off relations with the Holy See and China. Those relations have been getting better since 2014 with Pope Francis and an effort with Cardinal Parolin to build better relations, especially because there are basically two Catholic churches in China, one which is the state-controlled Patriotic Association, and the other which is the Catholic Church underground, so-called underground Catholic Church, which is faithful to Rome. Those have been getting closer with the appointment of bishops. There's been some sort of agreement on that, although nothing formal yet. But some say that it's been criticized by some quarters as the Holy See pursuing success at all costs. So there's still a way to go, but there is signs of improvement in relations, especially over the past few years.
Well, that's good to hear. Thank you so much, Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register.
Thanks, Lauren.
Coming up, the opioid crisis. Theyll Bennett returns to talk about the church's role in fighting this healthcare epidemic. And more hassle at the TSA security line? What you may need to take out of your carry-on. The Transportation Security Administration announces new rules coming to all U.S. airports. Items larger than a cell phone will have to be put in a separate bin during screening. The new procedures affect items like iPads, e-readers, and laptops. The rules are already active at 10 airports nationwide, but will be expanded to all U.S. airports during the weeks and months ahead. We continue our conversation about the opioid crisis in America. I recently sat down with the first U.S. drug czar. Theyll Bennett, the first director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, now chairman, Americans for Responsible Drug Policy. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you so much for talking about this just devastating issue. Why are you involved in this new group? Tell me about the group.
Well, I guess a little bit of history. I was the first drug czar or director of National Drug Control Policy. So I have a great interest in it for historic reasons. Second, we did some good. By we, I mean the whole country. But federal effort was significant in this regard and got the numbers of drug users down considerably during the 80s, going into the 90s. Now we have this opioid problem, which dwarfs the cocaine problem and the crack problem that we saw in the 80s, and it has to be addressed. This is a serious epidemic. My friend John Walters says maybe the most important, consequential, largest criminal enterprise in the history of the United States. Right now, the sale, importation, sale of fentanyl, carfentanil, heroin, and the like.
U.S. bishops have been speaking out about the opioid epidemic. In a pastoral letter, Bishop Edward Malisek, he's of Greensburg, Pennsylvania, wrote, "We can either sink down into despair or rise up in hope." There were 300 opioid-related deaths in his diocese in 1 year.
Yeah.
What does the church need to do?
Well, you know, that's exactly right. It was Jim Wilson, James Q. Wilson, the great scholar at Harvard and then later at UCLA, who wrote that drug use is wrong because it's immoral, and it's immoral because it destroys the mind and enslaves the soul. And that last word, the soul, is the jurisdiction of the church. That's the last time I looked. So the bishop should be talking about it, and that's what it does. I remember being struck, Lauren, when I was drug czar going around the country. I went to 130 communities talking to people, what's crack like? How many times people used spiritual, religious language to describe it?
To describe the
crack,
drug?
Crack is the devil. It tempts you like the devil does and says, I have a great deal for you. Something's good, something great. It'll make you feel like you've never felt before, and that's all true. You'll never have that feeling again, though. All you got to do is fork over your money or your soul, or both. So I think that is the right language. Now, you can't use that language everywhere in American society today, though. You know, it's just not respectable.
People don't want to hear it as we become a more secularized nation.
Right, enslave your soul. What do you mean? Well, how about it wrecks your life? There's a
okay.
There's a picture going around, and it's a picture of children in car seats in the back seat of a car, and in the front seat are two adults passed out with their heads thrown back, one man, one woman, and they have just overdosed. Or maybe not overdosed, just regularly dosed, and are passed out. Foster care in some parts of Ohio, West Virginia, New Hampshire is being overwhelmed because children are losing their parents to this stuff.
So what does the message have to be to young adults, to children, to get them to understand the danger of drugs and addiction? So what you're saying is get them before they start down this path.
Absolutely, because recovery is very difficult. Success in treatment is very difficult. Use the language that your audience will understand. Don't do this, whether you want to talk spiritual language, material success language, success in life, being able to cope, manage, enjoy anything else. This interferes with everything, your work, your ability to relate to people, friendships, even intimacy is deeply affected by this. You have something you can say. But in a part of the psyche of a lot of people in this country who say, well, if you like it, who are you to tell me?
Just do it. And the legalization of marijuana
Not helpful.
is not helpful. Why?
Because certainly not everybody who uses marijuana goes on to other drugs. But people who get into this stuff, who get into fentanyl, who get into heroin, almost all started with marijuana.
Why is this issue so important to Bill Bennett?
I was the first drug czar. It matters to me. I had a series of meetings with experts, and the more I heard about crack and what it was doing to our communities, I thought, man, we are pouring all this money into our inner cities for health and education and welfare. Meantime, this stuff is coming in and devastating families. Look, America is about success, and it's about success in the hands of individuals. And if you want to take their capacities away, this is about the most effective way to end self-government.
Bill Bennett, chairman of Americans for Responsible Drug Policy, former drug czar. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, Senator Tim Scott on how his faith influences his public service. Plus, Melania Trump's first solo foreign trip. What she'll be doing for wounded warriors. The Faith and Politics Institute honored 2 senators this week with the Lewis Houghton Congressional Leadership Award. The senators who received it exhibit qualities of conscience, courage, and compassion as leaders and public servants. Our next guest is one of them. Senator Tim Scott, a Republican from South Carolina, joins us now. What an honor to receive this award named after Congressman John Lewis. He was the prominent civil rights activist. How are you feeling about this?
It's really an amazing experience, and frankly, it just underscores the power of Matthew 5:44, that there is a way for us to love our enemies, and John Lewis is the prototype of how to do that, especially when you think about the challenges that he had to overcome, the blood he left at the Pettus Bridge, and the reality that through the gospel of Jesus Christ, we understand that truly darkness always surrenders to light. Love always overcomes hate. The more concentrated and focused love is, the more powerful it emanates throughout this world.
You know, in your speech, when you received the award, you referenced the Bible. Tell us how your faith guides your work in the Senate.
It really is the foundation of my life. The essence of my being really is a person who desires to please my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I liken it to the notion that Matthew 25:21 says, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." So my hope is that at the end of my journey here in this world, I'll hear from the good Lord, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." So I try to make sure that I'm never separated. I don't see faith and politics. I see faith in politics. And frankly, I think all of us reflect whatever it is that we believe. I just happen to understand and appreciate that there's a Savior, and I'm blessed to know him. And I am in desperate need of one because I'm a very flawed individual. So
Aren't we
the
all?
reality of it is that having that type of relationship is important. I'm not sure about you, Lauren, but I know that I am.
Republican Senator John McCain, the Lion of the Senate, returned after his diagnosis for brain cancer. And just a few days ago when he did, he called for senators to come together. What are you doing to reach across the aisle and put your faith into action?
Perhaps the most important thing I've done is I've been able to lead a group of Congress members to Mother Emanuel Church, where a man walked into the doors, murdered 9 people, attempted to create a race war, and Charleston in my state, South Carolina, responded with the power of reconciliation. I brought Democrats and Republicans to that church so that we could learn the lessons of reconciliation, learn the lessons of being indivisible at a place where one of the greatest tragedies, one of the greatest threats to the notion of reconciliation occurred just 2 years ago. And I'm hopeful that we walked away with this notion that all things are truly possible when we focus on our core common values and operate in a spirit of compassion. I liken it to 2 Timothy 1:7, that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Sometimes in Congress, it doesn't appear we have a sound mind.
You beat me to it. You definitely beat me to it. And I hope we can see some of this in the health care debate. Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, congratulations on your award.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I always enjoy watching you guys on my Comcast local cable provider.
Finally tonight, Melania Trump announces her first official solo foreign trip as First Lady. She'll lead the U.S. delegation to the 2017 Invictus Games in Toronto, started by Britain's Prince Harry in 2014. The event raises awareness for servicemen and women injured in combat. The games include swimming, wheelchair, basketball, and rugby. 90 American athletes are slated to compete in late September. That does it for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. To all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Wyatt Goolsbee fills in on the anchor desk for a little bit. I'll be back in 2 weeks. Good night, and God bless you.